On May 1st, 1945, the most dangerous city on earth was Berlin. Hitler was dead. The Soviet army was pouring into the streets. Inside the Führerbunker, the Nazi leaders were choosing between suicide or surrender. But one man chose neither. Heinrich Müller, the chief of the Gestapo, looked at his pilot and said, "I have no intention of being taken prisoner." Then he walked out the door into the night, and he didn't just escape, he evaporated. For 40 years, the CIA hunted him. They dug up his grave. It was empty. They hunted him in South America. He wasn't there. This is the story of the highest-ranking Nazi who simply got away. We know the villains of this story. We know the screamers. You've seen the footage 1,000 times. Hitler waving his arms, whipping crowds into a frenzy. Goering, the flashy drug addict in the white uniform. Goebbels, the failed playwright, barking into a microphone. They were loud. They demanded attention. They wanted the world to look at them. Heinrich Müller was different. If you walked past him on the street in 1939, you wouldn't have looked twice. He was short. He had a receding hairline. He wore thick, round glasses that magnified his eyes. He looked like a school teacher, or maybe a mid-level accountant who worried about tax forms. He didn't give speeches. He didn't write manifestos. He didn't care about the glory of the Aryan race or the mystical nonsense Himmler loved. He cared about one thing: the system. Müller was the man behind the desk. While the others were out posing for cameras, Müller was in his office at Prince Albertstrasse, reading files, thousands of them. He was a human computer before computers existed. He knew who was sleeping with whom. He knew who was stealing money. He knew who whispered a joke about Hitler in a bar 3 years ago. This is why he is so terrifying. He wasn't a monster who foamed at the mouth. He was a professional. He treated mass murder like a filing problem. He turned the chaotic violence of the Nazi Party into a smooth, efficient machine. And that is exactly why he was the only one who could pull off the greatest disappearance act in history. Think about it. The loud ones, they were easy to catch. Their faces were everywhere. But the man who knows where the bodies are buried, the man who built the fake identity networks, the man who held the secrets of every powerful person in Europe, that man has a back door. But before we track him through the jungles of South America and the back alleys of Cold War Moscow, we have to understand what he was running from. Because the reason Müller ran wasn't just fear of a rope. It was because he knew exactly what the Allies would do to him if they found out what was in his head. He wasn't just a participant in the crimes. He was the operating system. So let's go back to the beginning. How does a quiet Bavarian police officer become the most feared man in Europe? Müller didn't start as a Nazi. In fact, in the 1920s, he worked for the Munich political police, and his job was to hunt Nazis. He beat them up. He arrested them. He called them thugs. When Hitler came to power in 1933, the Nazi leadership wanted to fire Müller. They hated him. They remembered the beatings. But Reinhard Heydrich, the butcher of Prague, stopped them. He saw something in Müller. He saw a man who didn't care about politics. He didn't care about morality. He only cared about doing the job perfectly. Heydrich knew that a true fanatic is dangerous, but a cold, disloyal professional, that is a weapon you can use. So they hired him. And Müller did what he always did. He went to work. He transformed the Gestapo. Before him, it was a gang of thugs breaking windows. Müller turned it into an all-seeing eye. He introduced the card index system. It sounds boring, right? Card indexes? But this was the superpower of the 20th century. Imagine a room filled with rotary files, millions of cards, color-coded, cross-referenced. If you were a factory worker in Hamburg and bought a communist newspaper in 1932, Müller had a card for you. If you were a priest who didn't salute the flag, Müller had a card for you. He sat in his office from 8 a.m. to late at night. He rarely took breaks. He didn't drink much. He didn't party. He just signed papers. Signature. A family disappears in Paris. Signature. a torture order for a prisoner in Warsaw, signature, a train schedule for Auschwitz. This is where the banality of evil gets real. Müller wasn't angry when he did this. He was calm. Witnesses who survived interrogations with him said he was polite. He would offer them a cigarette. He would speak softly, like a disappointed father. He would say, "Come now, why don't you just tell us? It will be so much easier." And if they didn't talk, he would nod to the guards, pick up his pen, and go back to his paperwork while the screaming started in the basement. He didn't enjoy the pain. He just didn't care about it. It was a means to an end. The end was a completed file. This detachment made him indispensable. When the final solution was planned at the Wannsee Conference in 1942, Müller was there. He wasn't the guy giving the big ideological speech. He was the guy taking notes. He was the one figuring out the logistics. How many trains? How many guards? What is the cost per head? He made the Holocaust run on time. And this creates a massive problem for us in 1945, because a man like that doesn't panic. When the Soviet tanks smashed into the outskirts of Berlin, the Nazis lost their minds. Himmler tried to run away in a disguise, but got caught because he was carrying his own ID cards. Goering tried to surrender and expected to be treated like a king. Müller was already 3 moves ahead. The last sighting. It is late April 1945, the end of the world. Berlin is a burning skeleton. The air smells of sulfur, rotting bodies, and wet concrete. In the Führerbunker, the mood is apocalyptic. Hitler is preparing to kill himself. Magda Goebbels is preparing to poison her children. Everyone is drunk, terrified, or hysterical, except Heinrich Müller. He is still working. He is still in his uniform, perfectly pressed. He is still interrogating people. Even as the Russians are a few blocks away, Müller is executing traitors in the courtyard. He is tying up loose ends. This is where we get the most chilling testimony. It comes from Hans Bauer, Hitler's personal pilot. Bauer was a legend, a WWI ace. He was planning to escape. He wanted to fly Hitler out, but Hitler refused. On May 1st, after Hitler's suicide, Bauer is packing his gear. He sees Müller. The Gestapo chief is standing there, looking at a map. He looks completely unbothered. Bauer asks him, "Gruppenführer, what are you going to do?" Müller looks at him. His face is blank. He says those famous words, "We know the Russian methods exactly. I have no intention of being taken prisoner by the Russians." Bauer assumes this means suicide. That was the standard Nazi exit plan. A cyanide capsule and a bullet. Quick, clean. The coward's way out, as the Allies called it. But Müller didn't say, "I'm going to kill myself." He said, "I have no intention of being taken prisoner." There is a difference. The last verified sighting of Heinrich Müller happens a few hours later. He is seen walking out of the bunker. He is heading towards the subway tunnels, the Berlin U-Bahn. It was a labyrinth of underground tracks, sewers, and bunkers that connected the whole city. He walks into the darkness, and the lights go out. The next day, the Soviets take the bunker. They find the bodies of Goebbels and his wife. They find the charred remains of Hitler. They find generals who shot themselves. They find secretaries hiding in closets. But they do not find Heinrich Müller. No body, no uniform, no glasses, nothing. For the Allies, this was a nightmare. You have to understand, Müller wasn't just a war criminal. He was the database. He knew the names of every Soviet spy the Nazis had turned. He knew the location of every hidden bank account. He knew where the looted art was. If the Americans caught him, he was an intelligence gold mine. If the Soviets caught him, he was a weapon against the West. If he escaped, he was a ticking time bomb. The race was on. The war was over, but the hunt had just begun, and the hunters had no idea they were chasing a ghost. Flash forward to 1963. The Cold War is freezing Europe. The Berlin Wall is up. West Berlin is an island of democracy surrounded by Soviet territory. Rumors have been swirling for nearly 20 years. Some say Müller is in Argentina. Some say he's in Cairo advising the Egyptian police. Some say he's working for the CIA. But there is a grave in Berlin, a specific grave in the Kreuzberg Military Cemetery. The tombstone says Heinrich Müller. The official story, the one the German government accepted, was that Müller died in the final days of the war and was buried there. Case closed. move on. But the survivors didn't buy it. The monumental hunter Simon Wiesenthal didn't buy it. The Israeli Mossad didn't buy it. They kept getting tips. I saw him in Bolivia. I saw him in a cafe in Damascus. So finally, under massive pressure, the authorities order an exhumation. It is September 1963. A team of diggers, pathologists, and police officers gather at the cemetery. The press is there. The world is watching. If the body is there, the mystery ends. They dig. They hit the coffin. They pry off the lid. The pathologist looks inside and pauses. He looks at the bones. Then he looks at the records. Then he looks back at the bones. This is not him. It wasn't even close. The skeleton in the grave belonged to 3 different people. It was a mismatched pile of bones thrown together to fill a box. The skull was wrong. The teeth were wrong. The grave was a fake. This changed everything. If the grave was fake, it meant someone had planted it. Someone wanted the world to stop looking. And who plants a fake grave? A man who is still alive. Overnight, Heinrich Müller went from presumed dead to most wanted. The CIA panicked. If Müller was alive, where was he? And who was he talking to? This is where the story gets into the realm of spy novels. But remember, this is real life. And in the chaos of 1945, real life was stranger than fiction. The Americans started tearing apart their files. They went back to the interrogation transcripts of other Nazis. They found something disturbing. Walter Schellenberg, a high-ranking SS intelligence chief, told the Americans a story in 1945. He said Müller had a secret channel with the Soviets during the war. He said Müller used to listen to Moscow radio broadcasts in his office. He said Müller once muttered, "Stalin is the only one who knows how to run a country. He purges his enemies. We are too soft, too soft." The Gestapo chief thought the Nazis were too soft. Schellenberg believed Müller defected. He believed on that final night in Berlin, Müller didn't run to South America. He ran east. He walked through the tunnels, surfaced in the Soviet zone, and handed him his card index. "I am Heinrich Müller. I know where all the bodies are. I can help you catch the American spies. Let's make a deal." The CIA spent decades chasing this shadow. We have the declassified files now. You can read the frustration in them. They had agents in South America chasing leads that went nowhere. In 1967, a man in Panama was arrested. He looked like Müller. He acted like Müller. The CIA sent a team. They fingerprinted him. It wasn't him. In 1971, a sighting in South Africa. In 1978, a sighting in Brazil. Every time, the trail went cold. But the Soviet theory kept growing. It made the most sense. Why did the Soviets never release any files on Müller? They found Hitler's jawbone. They had Goebbels' body. But for Müller, silence. Did they have him in a dacha outside Moscow? Was he helping the KGB build their own version of the Gestapo? It was the perfect nightmare for the West. The man who invented the modern police state working for the enemy. There was a specific piece of evidence that kept the hunters awake at night. A Soviet officer captured in the 1950s claimed he saw a man in Moscow who looked exactly like Müller, wearing a Soviet uniform, working in a specialized intelligence unit. Was it him, or was it just paranoia? The problem with searching for a man behind the desk is that he knows how to be boring. He doesn't buy a castle. He doesn't drive a Ferrari. He changes his name to Schmidt, moves to a small town, gets a job as a clerk, and blends in. Müller's superpower was his averageness. He could stand in a crowded elevator, and you wouldn't remember him 5 minutes later. For 70 years, the world assumed he got away. The empty grave was the proof. The logic was sound. He was too smart to die, too valuable to kill, and too professional to get caught. But in 2013, a German historian named Johannes Tuchel decided to open the files one more time. He wasn't looking for rumors. He wasn't looking for sightings in Argentina. He went back to the paperwork because Müller was a bureaucrat, and bureaucrats leave paper trails even when they die. The paper trail. Johannes Tuchel is the head of the German Resistance Memorial Center. He is a serious man. He doesn't care about conspiracy theories. He wanted facts. He started looking at the municipal burial records of Berlin from 1945, not the military records, the city records, the lists of unknown dead collected by the garbage trucks, and burial details in the weeks after the surrender. You have to imagine the scene in August 1945. The war is over, but the city is a ruin. There are bodies everywhere. The provisional government is trying to clean up to prevent disease. They're collecting corpses found in rubble, in temporary graves, in the streets. Tuchel found a document. It was a death certificate, but not a normal one. It was a reburial report. It stated that a body had been found in a temporary grave near the Air Ministry building in August 1945. The body was wearing a uniform. Inside the pocket was a service ID card with a photo. The name on the ID card, Heinrich Müller. Rank, Gruppenführer. Date of birth, April 28, 1900. Tuchel stared at the paper. It was right there. It had been there for 68 years. The document said the body was moved from the temporary grave to a mass grave in a registered cemetery. It wasn't the Kreuzberg cemetery where the fake grave was. It was the Jewish cemetery on Grosse Hamburger Straße. Wait, pause. A Jewish cemetery? The irony is almost too heavy to carry. This cemetery had been destroyed by the Gestapo. Müller ordered the destruction. He ordered the deportation of the Jews buried there. He turned it into a holding camp for people being sent to Auschwitz. And now the document said he was buried there?
Tuchel dug deeper. He found the statement from the gravedigger who moved the body. The gravedigger confirmed the ID. He confirmed the uniform. He said, yes, we found the Gestapo chief. We put him in the mass grave with the others. Why did nobody know this? Because in 1945, nobody cared. There were thousands of bodies. The registrars were overwhelmed. They filed the paper, stamped it, and moved to the next one. It was a bureaucratic error. The file was mislaid. The West German intelligence agencies never checked the municipal garbage removal records. They were too busy looking for secret bases in Antarctica. The man behind the desk didn't escape to South America. He didn't defect to Moscow. He didn't undergo plastic surgery. He died a few hundred meters from his bunker, likely killed by a stray shell or committed suicide, and was shoveled into the ground by the very people he tried to exterminate. Is it over? Is the mystery solved? Tuchel's evidence is strong. It is documented. It matches the timeline. It explains why he was never found. He was hiding in plain sight under the ground. But there is no body. The Jewish cemetery on Grosse Hamburger Straße is a mass grave. There are nearly 3,000 bodies in that pit. You cannot exhume it. Jewish religious law forbids disturbing the dead. And even if you could, the bodies are commingled. You would never find him. This means we will never have DNA proof. We will never have the skull. We only have the paper. And for some, that is not enough. Think about Müller's character. He was the master of fake documents. He was the master of planting evidence. Would it be impossible for him to plant a body with his ID card in his pocket? If you wanted to disappear, really disappear, what is the best way? You don't just run, you die. You provide a body. You provide a witness. You let the world think you are rotting in a mass grave in Berlin while you are sitting on a porch in Patagonia. I want to believe the paper. I want to believe that he died a pathetic death in the rubble, unmourned, buried anonymously. It feels like justice. It feels like the universe balancing the scales. The man who treated people like numbers became just another number in a book. But there is a tiny voice in the back of my head, the voice that remembers the empty grave in 1963, the voice that remembers the fake bones, the voice that knows Heinrich Müller was smarter than the people hunting him. He told his pilot, "I have no intention of being taken prisoner." He kept his word. Whether he died in the ruins or lived out his life in secret, he won that final game. He denied the world the satisfaction of seeing him in handcuffs. He denied the victims the chance to look him in the eye. Why does this story matter? Why are we still talking about a bureaucrat from 80 years ago? Because Müller represents a terrifying truth about evil. We like our villains to be monsters. We want them to be crazy. It makes us feel safe. We think, I'm not like that. I am not a monster. But Müller wasn't a monster. He was a man doing his job. He was a man who loved efficiency. He was a man who sat at a desk, drank coffee,
and signed death warrants without raising his pulse. He reminds us that you don't need to be a screaming fanatic to destroy the world. You just need to be a quiet professional who follows orders and turns off his conscience. The man behind the desk is the most dangerous person in the room because he's the one who makes the system work, and when the system collapses, he's the one who knows how to disappear. Heinrich Müller vanished, maybe into the earth, maybe into the shadows, but the machinery he built, the idea of the surveillance state, the idea of the all-seeing police, that didn't vanish. That stayed. So, what do you think? Do you trust the paperwork found in 2013? Do you believe the Gestapo chief died in the rubble? Or do you think the master of secrets pulled off one last trick? There are still files that are classified. There are still families in South America who refuse to talk to reporters. The door is closed, but it's not locked. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darkest corners of history, make sure you check out the other videos on the channel. We are digging up the stories they tried to bury. And if you want to know more about the men who escaped the bunker, I found a fascinating documentary that goes even deeper into the specific manhunt for Müller. It covers the 1948 interrogation reports I mentioned earlier. It's a crucial piece of the puzzle.